Hello and good morning or good afternoon whenever you are viewing this, and welcome to our webinar, Contracting with the City of Chicago. My name is Keisha Rogers, and I will be one of your hosts today, along with my co-host, which is Ms. Courtney L. Judas. So we will be talking about doing business with the City of Chicago, as well as certification for those that are interested in certification with the city. So with that being said, let's get started. So first, we would like to welcome you to the webinar and let you know that the Department of Procurement Services is committed to communications and outreach, which is key to keeping our citizens informed of different bid opportunities, new programs, and innovations. So one of the things that a lot of people are interested in is our buying plan. So we have a consolidated buying plan, which is a 15-month forecast including hundreds of upcoming opportunities for 12 city agencies. So it's a really, really good resource. You can definitely go to our website, which is www.chicago.gov/DPS, and click on the letter icon to sign up for our DPS alerts as well. So you can go to that website, get the consolidated buying plan, and also sign up for our DPS alerts. So once you sign up for DPS alerts, you will get alerts of different bid opportunities, new programs, and different things that are happening with DPS. Also, make sure you follow us on social media to stay informed. So you should be able to see our Facebook page, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We are on all of those social media avenues. So definitely make sure that you go to that to make sure you follow us. Okay. And then we have different resource guides. So we have four volume sets of resource guides expanding on the guiding principle of transparency. So these resource guides are divided into key areas of procurement. So you have procurement fundamentals, which is contract administration, incentives and programs. And then there's also resource guides on certification and compliance. So you can download those by going to chicago.gov/DPS guides. So a little bit about the Department of Procurement Services, an overview of our department. We are the contracting authority for the procurement of goods and services for the city of Chicago. So we work together as a team and with our customers to guarantee an open, fair, and timely process by establishing, communicating, and enforcing superior business practices. So that is DPS in a nutshell. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Courtney, and she will discuss doing business with the city of Chicago.
Thanks, Keisha, and thank you for everyone who's listening to this. So we'll be discussing some of the basics of doing business with the city of Chicago. And one of the first things that's important to keep in mind when you're doing business with the city is a couple of the key laws that govern our procurement processes. So there are two main laws you'll want to keep in mind. The first being the Municipal Purchasing Act. And this is the statute at the state level that governs the city's procurement practices. And then we also have Chapter 2-92 of the Municipal Code of Chicago. And this is the city ordinance that governs our procurement processes. So it's important to think of these as working together, as the Municipal Purchasing Act at the state level kind of gives the broad strokes of what guides the procurement process. And if you're looking for the more specific information about how the city operates, that's when you'll go over to the Municipal Code of Chicago. And then next thing we'll be discussing is the different procurement types you might see from the city. We have 5 main procurement types that we'll talk about today. They are small orders, competitive bids, requests for proposals or RFPs, requests for qualifications, RFQs, and job order contracts, which you might know of as job contracts. So the first procurement type we'll talk about in more detail is our small order process. And our small orders are our kind of least formal bid solicitation process. This is what we use for procuring goods and services up to goods and services of $250,000. These are still a type of competitive bidding, but unlike the more formal competitive bidding that we'll talk about next, these don't go through formal advertisement. They're still available for anyone to bid upon. You just go to our e-procurement website, and if you see a small order posted, they're usually posted for a shorter amount of time than our larger bid solicitations, but anyone is free to bid upon those. And then another important thing to keep in mind is you'll want to watch our small orders just like all of our other bids for MBE and WBE requirements. And these are going to be on all small, or could be on all small orders that are over $10,000. And then our next procurement type is our more formal, just standard competitive bids. And this is our formal bid solicitation process that we use for procuring goods and services that are over $250,000. These, unlike small orders, do go through a formal advertisement process. So you will see these in addition to being on our e-procurement website, just like the small orders. They will also be advertised in the Chicago Tribune as well as the Daily and the classified section. If you had done business with the city before, you might know we used to have our bid packages in the bid and bond room in City Hall, which is room 103. Now, rather than doing the paper bid bond packages, you'll be able to get your full bid solicitation package online on our e-procurement website. So that'll be the best place to go to get all of your resources for bidding. And then the bid solicitation for different projects will vary. And they are generally anywhere from 10 to 30 calendar days. You'll want to look on the cover page of any bid that you're considering bidding on, and it will always tell you when the bid opening date is, and that'll be the date that you have to get all of your bid documents in by. And another thing we always say to just keep an eye on is if that cover page also mentions a plan deposit being required. It's becoming less standard, but it's a good thing to keep an eye on anytime you're doing competitive bidding. Another important thing is to look at whether there is a pre-bid meeting or not. And every specification for the city that's a full competitive bid will indicate whether there is a pre-bid meeting, and if there is a pre-bid meeting, whether it is mandatory or optional. If that pre-bid meeting is mandatory, in order to be considered responsive for the bid, you will need to attend. So you'll want to make sure you're looking for if that's a mandatory or optional item. But even if it's optional, we strongly encourage everyone to attend these. They can be really informative and help you with submitting your bid. In the process, in the pre-bid meetings, we go over all the requirements for the bidding process. The specific specification will be reviewed. We address concerns about the specification, and there's a question and answer period too. So sometimes even if you go in and you don't think you have a specific question, these can be really helpful. You might hear another question where you just get an answer that's helpful for you, or that might prompt a question in you. And then as a result of the pre-bid meeting, sometimes we will then issue addendum or clarification to specifications, and those will be available to anyone online on our e-procurement site. And even if you see that there is no pre-bid meeting on your bid, you'll still have a chance to have your questions answered. What we encourage you to do is, as early as possible in the bid solicitation period, make sure you're reviewing your full bid documents. And if you have any questions, there will always be a procurement specialist and their contact information listed on each bid. And you can reach out to that specialist with any questions about your bid. And then while you're working on your bid submissions, we'll go over some of the things that you really want to keep an eye on. And one of the most important things is just to make sure you're reading everything very carefully and that you're filling in all required information. If there's a signature required, that you're making sure it's signed and that it's signed by someone who has signing authority for your company. If there's a notarization requirement, that you're doing that and making sure everything's notarized. And the reason we emphasize this so much is you'll see throughout the bid, sometimes there is a statement that the bid may be rejected if the requirement isn't met. So if there's something that states that and it's a requirement for the bid and you do miss the item, your bid might be rejected as non-responsive. We always want to make sure that doesn't happen. So encourage you to carefully review your documents, and before submitting, make sure that you are positive that everything that needs to be filled out has been properly filled out and attached to your bid. And then when you're actually going to submit your bid, you want to make sure if there is a bid bond or deposit requirement, that's something that you're submitting with the bid as well. We'll always say specifically what form that bid bond or deposit has to be submitted in. And then the last thing is just make sure you're paying attention to that bid opening date so that you make sure you submit timely. Now that we do electronic bidding, sometimes people run into technical issues, especially if it is their first time bidding on a project. So we always encourage you to try to build in a little extra time before that bid opening date. So if you do have technical issues, we have a great technical team who is happy to help you with any issues you run into. But unfortunately, if you run into them at the last minute, you might not have a chance to get a response in time. So make sure, especially if it's your first time or first couple of times submitting a bid, you build in a little extra time to make sure your bid gets submitted in time. Then after you do submit your bid, we will have bid opening on the date that's stated on your bid. And we do bid openings Monday through Fridays at 11 a.m. They're in our bid and bond room physically, but we also do stream them online on YouTube, so you can attend virtually if you prefer. And during bid opening, the bids are opened and read out loud and tabulated. And then the bid documents are reviewed for accuracy and completeness. And about 24 hours after the bid opening, you'll be able to view those bid tabulations online. After bid opening, the next step is the award process. So there's then a determination made about whether bidders are responsive and responsible for the award. And you might have heard me say these words a couple times already, and to give a little context for them, responsiveness essentially gets to whether you properly completed the bid, followed all instructions. That will make you a responsive bidder. And responsibility has a little more variation per spec, and it basically means whether you're a fit for that particular specification. So being a responsible bidder for one bid or a non-responsible bid for another, it won't necessarily impact each bid. It's on a case-by-case basis that evaluation is made. So for instance, if you are bidding on a large construction contract and you've never done construction work, and one of their requirements is you need to have done similar projects, you might not be considered responsible for that particular bid. But if you see another bid that does fit what your corporation does and you bid on that later, you can very well be considered a responsible bidder for a future bid. So if you ever do find and get a response that you weren't considered a responsible bidder, definitely don't think that has an impact on future bids. We encourage you to continue to bid with the city. But once the lowest responsive and responsible bidder is found, a recommendation of award is made where it's recommended that the bid is awarded to that bidder. And the bid, along with any performance and payment bond, insurance information, and funding agency award information is packaged together and then goes through the signature and approval process for the city. So the last few slides, we've been talking all about competitive bidding. Our next procurement type is a little different than that and small orders, which you heard before competitive bids, and it is request for proposals or RFPs. And this is the procurement method we use to submit proposals for new projects that require professional services. Typically, this is used when the city does not have its own in-house technical experts or resources to implement projects or services. And the biggest way the requests for proposals are different from competitive bidding is when you look at a competitive bid, the documents that you will see will outline the entire full scope for the project. What you sign at that point for the competitive bid will become the contract. For requests for proposals, when you see the documentation for the solicitation, the scope of services will be a bit broader and will give the general idea of the services that the city is looking for. But when you submit your response in the proposal, you will actually propose and fill in the details of how you would perform the scope that the city is looking for. And based on the proposals that are submitted, the city will then rank based on criteria that's in that request for proposals, the different proposals it received. And the contract will be awarded to the highest ranked proposal that the city receives. So unlike competitive bidding where the low bid will be what controls who's awarded the contract, price is typically a factor in who's awarded an RFP, but it's only one of many factors. And if you want to know for each specific solicitation what the different factors are. Every RFP will always outline the award criteria, so there will be an indication of what assessment method will be used to determine the rankings for the proposals. Then we have our next procurement type, which is requests for qualifications, or RFQs. And this is the method we use to submit qualifications from companies who have a high degree of technical expertise and knowledge in specific disciplines. So unlike the prior methods of procurement we talked about, where there's always at least some form of scope of services when we're going out in a solicitation, for the request for qualification, we're actually just trying to pre-qualify companies to build out vendor pools to respond to future task orders. So when you're submitting your response, you will only be speaking to specific qualifications, not specific projects. And then we will award to a vendor pool based on their qualifications. And when that pool exists, when specific projects then do come up, a mini bid will be put out just to that pool of vendors, where you'll then put in a bid solicitation response, similarly to the competitive bid process. And whoever has the lowest bid will then get a task order for that specific project. And this is used most frequently for our A&E contracts, and then for certain consulting categories as well. And then our last procurement type is our job order contracts, or JOC contracts. And this is actually a subset of competitive bidding. So for these contracts, there's a firm fixed price, but there's an indefinite quantity on the contract's specific items. And this is only used for construction projects, and it's used for small and medium construction projects. So for any large projects, there will still be a completely separate solicitation, but this helps the city not put out a ton of different bid solicitations for the same type of small and medium-sized projects that it requires for construction throughout the year. So the way these work when you see them advertised is there'll be a bid solicitation package that has a catalog of different construction tasks. And there will be pricing next to each of these tasks, and then a spot for you to bid your adjustment factor. The adjustment factor you bid will then determine what price you would get for each of the jobs within that construction catalog if you're awarded the bid. So for instance, if there was a task that's in the book said it was $2 and you bid an adjustment factor of 2, if you were awarded that contract and you were asked to do that particular task, you would get $4 for that task. And then regardless of the different procurement type, whether it's an RFP, RFQ, JOC contract, competitive bid, or small order, you are almost always required to fill out an economic disclosure statement, or you might hear us refer to them as an EDS. And this addresses the ownership for the company. You'll fill these out online, and it's required for not only the legal entity that's trying to get the solicitation for the city, it's also required for anyone who owns more than a 7.5% interest directly or indirectly in the applicant firm. Those all need to file the EDS as well. And this document essentially tells the city whether we're able to do business with that particular firm. And then a couple more things we just wanted to touch on briefly to make sure you're aware these exist, and the city does do, just for awareness, separate workshops on our programs and bid incentives, which will be our next 2 slides if you're interested in learning more information about them. The city has a number of programs all listed here that can really help you maximize your bid. They can help you get sometimes a percentage off of your bid just for evaluation purposes, or they can also help you get credit towards your MBE or WBE goals. And those goals will be talked about a little more later in this presentation. So this list here, you can find online on our website, a detailed document about each of these programs if you're interested in learning more about those. And then on this slide, we have the city's numerous bid incentives. When you look at any bid solicitation from the city, there'll be an indication of which of these incentives are available for that particular bid. And then there will be supporting documentation within the solicitation for what you'll need to fill out to apply for the bid incentives. And these are a really good idea to keep in mind when you're bidding, because if you do qualify for these, they will take different percentages off of your bid for the evaluation purpose. So for instance, if you qualify for a 2% bid incentive, whatever your total bid cost is, if you qualified for a 2% bid incentive, you would get 2% off of that total base bid price for when you're evaluating the bid for the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Although you would still ultimately, if you're awarded the contract, get your full bid price that you bid. And as I had mentioned earlier, we do award all of our competitive bids to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So sometimes when the pricing in the total base bids is very close, it can be the bid incentives. That's the difference between being the lowest or the second lowest bidder. And then also wanted to flag a newer requirement that as of 2021, we have enhanced diversity reporting. And this requires contractors to submit projections regarding when and to what extent in the contract certified firms are expected to be used. And if you end up falling below your projected usage for those firms, we ask that you provide an explanation of why that happened, as well as a recovery plan for getting the participation back up to the goal level. We also now require contractors who have agreements with the city submit annual reports regarding their business diversity programs, or if you don't have such a program, that you report a lack of the program. And in that report, you'll include information regarding expenditure on goods and services from minority-owned firms and women-owned firms during the prior calendar year. And then one more thing we wanted to make sure was on your radar. You've probably heard me say quite a few times references to our DPS website. If you're ever looking for more information about doing business with the city or any of the topics I've covered, or even additional things like copies of our contracts or prior modifications with other vendors, if you go to our DPS website, you can find all of that as well as the other information in the checklist on this screen. So we always encourage that as a really good starting point for additional information. And with that, I will kick it back over to Keisha to discuss certification.
Courtney. So again, my name is Keisha Rogers, and I will be discussing certification with the city of Chicago. I am actually a certification officer, one who actually reviews, approves, and denies applications. So our goals, pretty much at a glance, that we will be taking a look at today are the benefits of certification, who qualifies for certification, certification requirements, the application process, required information and documents, and what happens after applications are submitted. So let's look at the different types of certification programs that we manage. So we have the MBE, which is the Minority-Owned Business Enterprise, WBE, the Women-Owned Business Enterprise, BDE, Veteran-Owned Business Enterprise, and BEPD, Business Enterprise Owned and Operated by People with Disabilities. Those four are our local programs. We also handle the federal programs, which are the DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and ACDBE, which is Airport Concessions, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. The benefits of certification are that it provides visibility. So once you are certified and your application has been approved, your firm is listed in a directory, and this directory is available to the public. So anyone can go into the directory and pull up all certified firms. So general public, prime contractors, everyone has access to this directory. There are minority, women, and disadvantaged business participation goals on City of Chicago projects and with our sister agencies. And there are businesses in the private sector sometimes that look for businesses to be certified, and they are also putting out different contracts themselves. The City of Chicago also has a target market program, which provides exclusive bidding to certified minority and women-owned business enterprises. This allows certified businesses to take 100% of the contract because there are no subcontractor goals associated with the project. So who qualifies for certification? So African Americans, Hispanic, Asian Indian, women, veterans, people with disabilities, and other individuals who can prove social and economic disadvantages. So if you do not fall into one of these qualifying groups, but however you feel like you have been socially and economically disadvantaged, you do have the chance to complete an socially and economically disadvantaged affidavit, and you will be able to provide an explanation as to why you feel you fall into that category, and that can either be approved or denied by the department. The application process is all online. So there's no paper, you can't bring it in, you have to go online to apply for certification. The website is chicago.mwbbe.com. There is an application fee of $250 that is only for the local program. So for our federal program, which is the DBE and ACDBE, there is no fee. Now, if you're applying for BEPD, which is the local program, and that's the only thing that you're applying for, then you would not be subject to the $250 fee. For the local program, if you want to apply for the MBE and the WBE, there's just one fee. So in your application process, you'll select MBE, you'll select WBE, or all the programs that you're eligible for, and it's just the one fee of $250. So after you submit your application, you will receive an invoice via email, okay, for the local program. We ask that maybe you allow maybe a week or so after submission to get that email. We will not review your application until you pay the $250 application fee. You can pay it at any of the city's payment centers, and you must bring the invoice when paying in person. On the invoice, it will give you exact details on how to pay, where to pay, etc. What type of information do you need when you are applying for a certification? We need your contact information, your phone number, address, email address. We want a good email address that you will be checking on a consistent basis, because that is how we will communicate with you via email. You'll receive your invoice via email. If there's any additional information that's needed, you'll receive via email. So make sure the email that you provide is an email that you are checking on a daily basis. You will have to let us know the type of certification you are seeking. So you'll see listed here the different certification programs that we handle. And like I mentioned before, you select the ones that you are applying for. So you can select more than one, but the local program and the federal program are two separate applications. So if you're doing the local program, you'll select the MVP or the WBP if you're a minority and a woman. Then if you want to apply for the federal program, you have to actually apply and do a separate application, and then you'll select DBE and ACDBE. Remember that ACDBE is airport concessions. So that is for people that are either want to be a concessionaire in the airport or providing services to a concessionaire. If you are applying for BEPD, you do require a Schedule G form. You should be submitting that to the mayor's office for people with disabilities. And once that is approved, then they will notify us, let us know that that Schedule G has been approved. For the VBE, which is the Veterans certification, it does require a DD 214 or DD 215. So you will upload one of those forms with your application. You will also provide ownership information, employee information, facility information such as a lease, financial information such as your tax returns. For non-construction, 7 years. For non-construction, 3 years. Construction, 7 years. Any licenses that are applicable to your business. Okay. So if you are an architect, then we do look for you to have the state of Illinois architect license. We look for people to have GC licenses if needed through the Department of Buildings. If you're not sure if your business requires a license, a good resource would be our Business Affairs and Consumer Protection Office that you should definitely reach out to and discuss with them to see what type of license is needed. You also have to provide proof of eligibility. So your resume, and that should be a detailed chronological resume. Evidence of executed contracts and or invoices, your driver's license and birth certificate or passport, proof of equity contribution. So how much did you use to start up your firm? Provide proof of that. Then you have to provide your business bank account signatory card. So when you open up your business bank account, you had to sign a document to let the bank know who is the authorized signers on your business bank account. you have to provide a copy of that signature card. We'll provide an organization chart, equipment list, and loan information if you have any types of loans. As I mentioned before, you will be providing your business and individual tax returns. So 3 years are needed for non-construction firms for the local program, and 7 years for construction firms for the local program. Now, for the federal, which is the DBE and ACDBE firms, you will provide 5 years for tax returns. Now, if you don't have that, we understand, especially if your business was just started a year ago, we know that you will only have 1 year of tax return. So that would not be an issue. But if you've been in business 20 years, then you definitely should have the 7 years. If you're a construction firm, 3 years for non-construction for the local program. You'll also be providing W-2s and 1099s and personal net worth statements for construction firms and all firms that are applying for DBE and ACDBE with the City of Chicago. So you will have to provide that personal net worth statement with your application. So once your application is submitted, it can take 90 to 120 days from the day we receive all documents. So that clock starts ticking. It does not start ticking once you hit the submit button, because remember, if it's the local program, you have not even paid your application fee. So once you pay your application fee, then your application is assigned to a certification officer. The certification officer, if they need any additional documents, they'll send you a request for information. And once we have all of the information you need, it can take up to 90 to 120 days to process your application. Your application is checked to make sure we have all documentations. We thoroughly audit the applications. So if you forget something, that's not like an automatic denial. Again, that's when we'll reach out to you via request for information through the portal, which you'll receive through your email, which is again why I mentioned the importance of checking your emails daily while you're going through this process. You may receive or require a site visit. So if you are the local program and you're trying to get certified in construction or as a supplier or distributor or trucking, then you will require a site visit. All new DBE and ACDBE, again, that's the federal program, all of those applicants will receive a site visit. So you will receive a call from our field analyst to schedule that site visit if your application does require that. So once you are approved, you have to maintain your certification. So all vendors must submit an annual no change affidavit. You're letting us know whether or not there have been any changes. You will provide your tax return so we can keep up to date with your gross receipts. Now, if there are any type of changes and your no change affidavit is not due, then you have to notify us within 10 business days. And we will go in and do either an expansion application, like if there's an ownership change or if we want new nexus codes, or if it's something like an address change, then you would just go in and do like a material change. You can report those changes online via the portal, like I mentioned, or with an email to dps.certification@cityofchicago.org. But the best way is to definitely log into your account, because when you do the application, you will create a username and a password, log into your account, and go ahead and either do that expansion application, your no change affidavit, or material change if that applies to the organization. Once you are certified, you will get certified in certain codes. They're called Nexus codes, NAICS codes. So let's say you get certified and then you only get certified in plumbing. But then a year down the road, now in addition to plumbing, you are doing flooring. Okay, so now you want to expand your services. You will submit your request in writing online in the portal via the expansion application, excuse me. You will include the additional Nexus codes that you're requesting, and you're going to provide supporting documentation. Again, it's requiring licenses, updated resumes, insurance, copies of contracts to show that you are currently working in the area that you're requesting for your certification to be expanded into. Now, this is very important. What you need to know about the top 10 reasons applications are denied. So unsubstantiated or questionable ownership or control. For certification, the qualifying owner needs to be 51% or more in control, or have 51% or more ownership in the firm. So if that is questionable, that's the reason you could be denied. If there's an unclear description of the critical functions and who is responsible, The company cannot substantiate where or how the startup fund's expansion capital was initiated. If you remember, one of the things you do provide to us is that initial equity contribution. Outside secondary employment takes most of the majority owner's time each day. So we're not saying that you cannot have a second job, but you would have to explain how you're able to have a full-time job and efficiently and effectively run the day-to-day operations of the firm that you are requesting for certification. If the company is not located in one of the 6 county regions. So in order to qualify for the local programs, your business has to be local. So you need to be in one of the 6 county regions, which includes Cook, Kane, DuPage, Will counties, etc. So if you're not local for the local program, then that is definitely a reason for denial. For the federal program, you just need to be in the state of Illinois. If your point of contact does not respond to requests for information in a timely manner, and that's why I mentioned it's very important to have an active email address that you're checking daily. So you should be responding to us in a timely manner. If you do not, that is definitely a reason for your application to be denied and closed. Inconsistencies with the applicant firm name among various documents. Problems with contracts such as missing, incomplete, not signed, and executed by qualifying owners or have no corresponding proof of payments. Required documents are not attached and no explanation is given as to why the documents are not available. So for instance, if you only have one tax return, 1 year tax returns, and you know the requirement is 7, then just provide an explanation as to why you do not have the other 6, which could be, I am a startup firm, I've only been in business here. And the last reason the applications can be denied are the required amount of years of tax returns were not submitted and signed. You do need to provide a wet signature. So physically sign your returns. Understand we're in 2023 and who actually physically signs their returns. We do electronic filings, but just take a couple seconds, sign your return before you upload it to us, or it could be returned to you, okay? So again, tax returns for the local program, 3 years for non-construction and 7 years for construction. And for the federal program, you need 5 years of tax returns. So hopefully that helps. And you are free to go on to, again, like I said, like our social media pages, share this, workshop with your friends and family on social media using DPS workshops, and spread the word to help the city business community learn about the programs that we offer and initiatives are available at the city of Chicago. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead now and ask any questions, and then we will get back to you best as we can with the answers to those questions. So thank you for taking the time out to attend this webinar. We hope you got a lot of useful information. Feel free to contact us. I will give my contact information, my email, if you want to contact me about any certification questions or information. My email is my name, Keisha, Keisha, .Rogers, ROGERS, @cityofchicago.org. I'll just see if Courtney has any final comments. Other than that, thanks again.
Thank you. And I will just share my contact information as well in case it's needed. My email is Courtney, COURTNEY, .Delgiudice, DELGIUDICE, @cityofchicago.org. And as Keisha mentioned, if you have any questions, there's a box on the right-hand side of the video where you can submit those and we will be sure to get back to you. Thank you.